All right, team. Well, I think for the sake of getting started, and Brittany, if you got we are recording this. That's great. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar on hybrid learning best practices. I'm Chris Bradford, president and co-founder of Newline Interactive. I'll be facilitating this discussion today. Very excited about this. This is a topic that's come up more and more in discussions, really across lots of our business from coast to coast with reselling partners and end users. And we had the brainchild to get together some real thought leaders in one place who are really grappling with these issues of today right now to get their thoughts out to folks that are interested in hearing and how folks are struggling to meet some of the challenges that we're all being faced with in a COVID world. So very briefly, I'd like to introduce the panelists so you know who we're talking to here, and then we'll jump right into the topics. And I think we're probably going to have a pretty fast-paced hour. If I know these gentlemen, none of them are shy, so it'll be a good sporty discussion here. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Kyle Berger. So Kyle is Chief Technology Officer at Grapevine-Colleyville School District here in Texas. About 14,000 students, so very large school district here. Kyle, a very prolific writer and speaker, Technology Director of the Year for all the state of Texas, 2020 National EdTech Leadership winner, very much a thought leader and innovator in that K-20 EdTech space. So Kyle, thank you, sir, for taking time to join us this morning.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Second, Butch Juelg, Associate Vice Chancellor of Technology Services at Lone Star College. Butch, again, thought leader in the higher ed space, over 20 plus years of education tech management. Another notable speaker and writer on many topics, a number of national conferences, spoke on everything from leadership to governance to AV integration to a whole host of things that Butch gets to grapple with in his daily life. So Butch, thank you for joining us today as well, sir. And third, Juelg. So Dr. Juelg is the Director of Learning Environments at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Just like the other two panelists, these gentlemen don't mind writing and speaking on this topic as thought leaders. So Joe, 2019 AV Nation AV Professional of the Year. Joe hosts his own Higher Ed AV podcast, co-founder of the Higher Ed Technology Managers Alliance, and just in his spare time goes ahead and writes best-selling books as well on the topic of EdTech management in the higher ed space. Regular keynote speaker and writer in the AV space. So Dr. Juelg, thank you for joining us as well.
Hey, thanks so much for the invite. This is great.
Well, we are happy to have all three of you gentlemen here. So everybody that's dialed in and listening, feel free. We want this to be an interactive discussion. I'll be throwing some topics at the panelists. They'll be giving their thoughts. Feel free to interrupt or also pop your question into the chat session. We will have folks monitoring that, and we can pick conversation out of the chat session. Also, at the end, we will have some specific time for Q&A. All right, just want to make sure we want to get your thoughts as well as audience members. So with that, how about if we jump right in? So first topic, gentlemen. What is the biggest challenge that you're each finding that you're having to address as you're preparing for a fall semester, probably unlike most fall semesters that you have all prepared for in your 20 plus years? And what solutions are you putting in place to address that major challenge? So maybe this first one, Kyle, if you don't mind starting, and then Butch and Dr. Juelg, we'd love to get your comments as well.
Absolutely. So looking at the K-12 market space, it's every day is changing. We're getting different regulations and rules that are coming down from local officials to state officials. So the great plan that we have today, we'll probably do another one tomorrow and just keep moving with it. Of course, the challenge is how we're going to coexist in an in-person and virtual environment at the same time with the same staff. So, of course, a lot of great professional development going on with our staff leaders. One of the benefits and how we are designing our rooms and our distribution model is with our Newline panels. So we have Newline panels with the OPS, the operating system, onboard computing on them in all of our classrooms. So what we are currently doing is installing cameras in all of our classrooms that face our interactive panels. And that interactive panel now becomes the gateway for WebEx, which we use as our primary delivery. And the model set is our teachers will teach those students that have chosen in person, physically in the room at the same time while streaming live to those kids at home, keeping the same class schedule. And then all that content, of course, being recorded and pushed to our LMS of Canvas at the same time. The biggest goal is to try to streamline that for the teacher. We know it's already a complicated process, but if we can make it as easy and seamless to do both, then that's a big achievement for us. So that's where we're currently at. And then, of course, working on our sound reinforcement abilities if masks start coming into play as well. So that's kind of our first foray at it. We're about a couple of weeks away from school here in Texas. They just, in our county, said that we will go online until September 28th. But of course, that's been challenged. So we're still waiting to see where we land on that. But that's our current model and kind of how we're working on developing that to achieve somewhat of that hybrid situation in the K-12 space.
Outstanding. Thank you, Kyle. Butch, what would you say, sir, on that biggest challenge that you're finding yourself grappling with? Oh, Butch, we got you muted, sir.
But that, like Kyle, that daily change is, you think you know what the process is going to be, and then it changes when the start times are, what classes are going to be in person, and like many organizations, ours is we are looking at 50% online, 25% face-to-face for those programs that require it, and then 25% of a hybrid model. We and like I'm sure others too, is funding is a key concern. How are we going to get funding to make the changes that we need to in our classrooms? And then determining the needs and what will instructors actually use. We're going to have to find something that we just can't stick technology in there and think they're going to be happy with it. So, but we're lucky we have some systems in the classrooms that we can just add on to. We don't have to create new ones. But we are going to have a lot of ad hoc spaces where we'll use the Newline boards to wheel them into those spaces. They'll have, they'll have the interactive board. There'll be whiteboards. They can stream the content for internet consumption, which is key. So all those things we're having to consider.
Totally got it. Joe, would you mind weighing in on that, sir?
Yeah, they both took all the answers because it is exactly the same thing. It's the unknown. That's the most difficult part of all of this. We even just sent a email last night that said, we're preparing for, limited on purpose, on campus, on-prem activities with unless the governor tells us we can't. So we're, one email, one press conference away from every plan you have blowing up, right? And that's the toughest part. And so when you start looking at, okay, what solutions are you going to put in? You have to start from the lowest common denominator, and that's safety of the students, right? No matter what, how can we keep them safe? Whether we're going to be in the hybrid environment, a fully online environment, an on-prem environment, the safety of them comes first. That's where you start building the solutions from. And then you go, okay, well, now what happens if we can bring somebody in or have a faculty member use a classroom as a production studio, for example, but the students maybe have to be away. Now you have to think, how can I get them the content, right? How can we get it clear? How can we get it delivered precisely? It's where you start using the cameras and get them up to the interactive boards, right? And being able to, none of us want this, right? None of us want this environment. None of us want to teach this way. But it's the reality of what we're living in. So as much as we can now make the content delivery as frictionless as possible is where we start to find the solution. So yeah, is it putting in the cameras and the voice lift, the microphones and ceiling mics? And yes, it's all of that. But first, it's how can we take the content and deliver in a way everybody can equitably learn knowing that they're not in the best environment that they should be in either, which would be in front of the faculty member. So that's really where you start to change the room. You say, okay, let's give the faculty members opportunities to where if you want to use your whiteboard, if you want to use an interactive board, if you want to, share screens so you can still be seen on camera, those are all those things that you start to weigh and figure out, and then you put the solutions in that deliver that, right? And hopefully, no matter what, if the governor should give us an announcement later today or tomorrow, those things still apply, right? Because you put safety first.
Totally got it. No, Joe, I think all three similar themes and different challenges here. I think one theme that you guys were all talking about, and we hear it from so many of our end user customers, is this whole concept of flexibility. Right? If I could just know with that crystal ball, if somebody could just tell me this thing's going to end on November 14th, okay, I know how to go put a plan in place to set that up. Of course, the pesky little problem is it going to go away by November 14th or be 10 times as bad or look good for 2 weeks and then holy smokes, we shut down 4 weeks later. So this whole concept of flexibility, right, of how it's that continuously moving target that whether it's the governor or the biology of a virus and how it transmits from one human to another, there's some pretty hard curveballs coming at you. So if you don't mind, Joe, starting this discussion, maybe go a little deeper on that flexibility piece. Just first, it sounds like that is a criteria that all of you gentlemen are having to really grapple with. How are you trying to address that need for flexibility, knowing that the goalposts may get moved on you, like you said, in a press conference or at a hospital or whatever, however they get moved?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, even when you think about flexibility, it's not even just taking one faculty member and one student saying, how can I adjust this for them? You're taking 40,000 students and 10,000 faculty members, understanding each one has their own preferences, the way that they've, I feel awful for faculty members. They spent, decades developing a craft in a certain environment where it's comfortable for them. And now we're blowing all that up, right? Again, no one's fault. It's just the nature of what we're faced with. And so now, when you talk flexibility, you say, how can I now make it so that you can use your strengths and bring that to the students in the way they can learn best? And so that, the kind of buzzword going around is the high flex, right? Learn how it works best for you. Are you someone who needs personal attention? Are you someone who can fully be online and that works for you? Or do you need the added, TA support? It's all these other things that go with pedagogy as well as technology, right? Because we're so, even today's youth that are so technologically advanced still came through K through 12. Like if I look at, at the university with a traditional, you show up to class and you're lectured to and taught and you have your social activities and you move on. And then you're changing that. So flexibility means how can I bring that to you in a way that works best for you and offering all those options. If I look at faculty members, there's some who are going to be absolutely fine, still staying at home, teaching to a webcam. That's going to be great for them. It's no big deal. There are others who have begged us, I need my whiteboard. I need to stand in front in front of a class, and I need you to fake a class for me so that I can feel comfortable, right? They're still a genius in their field, but being able to say, okay, how can I now, yes, you want this, we'll create a room for you that will be able to do that. Others are going to be absolutely fine having, a flexible model where maybe some students are on-prem, especially if you look for us, even though majority of classes might be where the students are virtual, our arts and our high-end research cannot be done virtually, right? Or at least it can't be done well virtually. And being in LA and USC, we're famous for our music school, our cinema school, our dance school. Those are tough. So how can we create an environment there for them, and also maybe the faculty member doesn't want to come back because they're a group, their demographic is that they're they're at risk, right? Or students who still say, I don't want to, your students' parents say, you're not going back until there's a vaccine. So you start looking at all these things and how can I bring that in all those different forms, right? And there's no right answer.
Completely get it. When you think of the scale of 40,000 students and 10,000 professors, my brain sort of cramps up on that. Butch, when you talk about the flexibility, you mentioned one thing particularly, this whole ad hoc spaces, right? Where, we got students, whether, they're not all in kindergarten yet. So students that are in places that we've never put them before. So that whole concept of flexibility and ad hoc spaces, can you talk a little bit more in depth about that, of what you're doing and how you're outfitting these places that you never 6 months ago would have envisioned? Yeah, we're going to pop a chemistry class in there and it's going to go great.
Yeah, Joe really nailed it. Tech choice rules is king. Everybody learns in a different way. And so we're looking at a lot of different things. And these ad hoc spaces is one. We were asked straight up in the beginning and said, we need a solution that from our classroom that we can stream content to students on the internet or into an overflow space, so we can honor the social distancing. So that's taken us into spaces where we weren't before, into these ad hoc type spaces. And it's also taken us into the other thing they asked was, if I'm in one room and I may want to project it to another classroom at another campus and things like that. So we needed to look at all those different ways, how we can provide it. Because remember, we're having face-to-face classes, we're having hybrid classes. So that means half the class may come one week and the half the class may come the next week. So they either need to be on campus somewhere else or at home. So we have to provide that content no matter where they are. It's going to be both live and recorded. But these ad hoc spaces, they're still trying to figure out how they're going to have people on campus and how they're going to work together. And these spaces are not going to be as condensed as before, so we got to spread them out, and we just can't run a bunch of technology every place. So that's where the smart boards and things like the Newline boards that we have will be a huge advantage to us, where we can just wheel them in. We'll have everything is there. They'll have conference spaces for employees. So they're going to provide us a lot of good options going forward. And then, once this is all over, hopefully one day, we will be able to take advantage of the technologies that we did and either install them in certain areas or continue to use them as a ad hoc space technology.
Totally got it. And Kyle, if you don't mind, on the flexibility piece, I know similar and different, of course, where USC's got people flying in from Romania and Maine and Atlanta and yes, LA. You have a geographically more tight group that comes to see you. So you've had some different innovation ideas too on the flexibility piece. Would you mind elaborating on those?
Absolutely. And for us in K-12, as you know, I'm educating from 5 years old or 4-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-olds. And we all know that not everybody is conducive to online learning. And so how we can mirror out that environment in the most accurate way for all styles of learning for our kids. And the flexibility for us knowing that we have to be able to switch on a dime, that we might be in person today, but tomorrow we might all be at home. And how can we kind of keep that consistency for our kids overall? So some of the things we've done is really starting to build community outreach to where we are retrofitting some school buses with actual interactive panels that we can snap onto the side of our school buses, and we can go into apartment complexes or other areas and conduct classes outside, because there is some things, as you mentioned, like Joe was mentioning with certain courses, that there is still an element of either a face-to-face or some sort of hands-on that we need to recreate. So taking makerspace, STEM labs, and those kind of things out into the community for our kids, it's almost turning it into like where the ice cream truck used to come through the neighborhood. Now it's the STEM bus that's coming through, or the art bus and those kind of things, because we know, especially students at younger age, they need that interactiveness with peripherals and things. So we've really started looking at all sorts of ways to do that. Branching out in our facility, like Butch mentioned, with interactive panels on wheels, to cafeterias, any kind of space that's possible is now a learning space. We've always wanted that for our facility. Everywhere is a space to learn. Now we're kind of needing to press that further, but by going beyond our walls is kind of something a little different that we've done by pushing into the community with some different type of outreach.
I want to jump on with that because Kyle, that's fantastic. Sorry, I just took over the show from you, Chris.
No, Joe, please.
I love that because you've found a way to answer the equity problem, right? Exactly. And I think that's huge, especially I think and I'm not an expert in K-12 at all, However, I sit there and think how many broken homes and kids need that personal connection much more than maybe a college age student, can quote unquote deal with it or find it right. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's important at a different level. Right.
Absolutely.
And so, we found equity issues and things like, people that live in rural areas can't get Wi-Fi, right? Things like that, which, you kind of forget that not everyone, as Chris, you mentioned, people fly in from everywhere. We're proud to be the number one percentage of international students anywhere in the world, which means they come from places where the infrastructure isn't built up, right? So how do you start solving those? So I love that, Kyle. I mean, I think that's just fantastic. And a lot of school districts should learn from that because that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Equity
totally innovative.
Equity is a huge thing for us to reach to all these different kind of kids. And of course, as you know, sometimes in K-12, school is the only thing some of these kids have, from where they get their only meal for a day to any kind of interaction. And plus also the families who are having to work nonstop, they can't get their kids the connectivity at home. So we distribute internet to all of our students at home. We're distributing hotspots by the hundreds, thousands to our students just to get that connectivity. It's very important on the equity side.
No, huge concept there. No, thank you for that, Kyle. Butch, would you start off with this one? So the title of this thing was best practices for hybrid learning environments, right? So I know there's a bunch of folks on the call that are thinking, okay, I've probably figured out some of this, but gosh, I don't know what I'm figuring out and what I'd like to rethink. If you were to pick your favorite number, 2 or 3, as you're kind of talking to the audience of, hey guys, you've got to figure out your own environment, but here are some best practice concepts that I'd recommend you sort of keep in your mind as you're kind of grappling with this. What would you give the audience there, Butch, to start us off on this one?
So for that, you really have to understand what your instructors and your students need. That's foremost. You can't just sit there and present technology without their involvement. So you really got to talk to them and understand what their goals are and what success is going to look like, and understand that not everybody is the same, right? We get back to that equitable solution. You got to find something that, everybody doesn't have laptops, everybody doesn't have mobile devices, everybody doesn't have internet at home. So one solution is not going to fit everyone. And so your solution needs to be flexible. For example, this year, we, as part of our way to make sure everybody is successful, is we're giving out about 10,000 laptops this semester. And we've never done that before. We're checking out laptops to folks that need them. They don't have the technology. We're providing hotspots in some instances, but you have to look at your customers, who's going to be using this system. And then the last thing is really just to keep it simple. The more difficult it is, the less it's going to be used. The more frustrated they'll be, and they'll just won't be successful. So it's simple. Look for equitable solutions and partner with your institution or with your folks.
Outstanding. No, good stuff. That ease of use thing is a theme we hear a whole lot. Kyle, would you mind following that up, sir? What do you think on that kind of 2 or 3 best practices that you'd want to keep folks in the K-12 environment thinking about while they're grappling with this?
Yeah, the one thing that is key is that, we have students of all sorts of different types, from our special needs students, could be visual, hearing, any kind of impairments there, that we have to also be able to grapple with how we're going to keep educating those students on the same level. But also the consistency from our teachers on the way instruction is being delivered. For us in K-12, learning management systems haven't been as much of a standard, but now we are needing to really standardize on an LMS system so that we have consistency for the student in person and at home. And so that can be flexible back and forth. So it's consistency of that content delivery, because for us as well, it's not just the student element, and I know in college has this too, but we have a large parent element that wants to be involved right over the shoulder with the students too. So getting those parents the access and being able to navigate. So those are very key for us in the consistency of delivery type. And then the next thing to consider, and for us, we issue devices to every student, is support, technical support of the hardware. Because now what typically happens in the old normal days, if that student's device broke in the classroom, that's okay. The teacher's still there. We're still learning. But now if at home that student's technical laptop or anything stopped working, now learning stopped. So one thing to really think about is how you're going to support all these devices out there for the students if you have to. And for us, we've developed a contactless tech support system to where we place outside of our facilities lockers. Like think of Amazon lockers. I have these lockers based throughout the community to where 24/7 access to pick up spare loaner devices, place your device in for repair, really providing that opportunity to eliminate any excuse that you don't have the tool to learn. And so we've really taken a step in that direction on how we can also do the technical support aspect of it.
Super key point there. Joe, what do you think, sir, on those 2 or 3 best practices that you have want to keep in everybody's mind?
Yeah. Oh, boy, the things that Butch and Kyle just said, fantastic. I look at it this way, even just going back to old school AV, right? It's signal flow, right? The end of the line will never be better than the initial source, right? So you have to start with the source quality, right? So if you're looking at a best practice, let's take, and I'm going to simplify it. I know hybrid can mean a lot of different things, but let's say faculty member in room, students not in room. Okay, I'm going to use that as my example. Now, if you look at that, if I can't capture the audio and I can't make that audio clear, and it can't be clear, I mean, if it's the faculty member in the room, they probably don't need a mask or whatever, but if there is some, they might have to have it. How can you make that understandable, right? The content is actually the easy part because it can be done off a screen share nowadays, right? You don't have to necessarily have a camera on a whiteboard or whatever, right? It's even, interactive boards can share that screen out. That's the easy part. But again, audio, is that clear and can it make sense? Because it only gets worse as it goes down the chain, right? Lighting, right? People don't think about things like if you put interactive displays or you have projector systems and then you turn the lights on, now put a camera on that. It's fine when you're in the room as the producer. How about go to the next room and jump on your Zoom or Teams call and see what the other person is seeing, right? It's those little things that you don't think about, just the angle. You might be up there turning some fluorescent bulbs off because the angle of it just shines a glare on the screen, right? There are just some things that you want to now look at, from the far end, the end of your source, of your signal flow needs to match as close as possible the beginning of your signal flow. So set up that mock environment. And that's really what we ended up doing to come up with our solution. What we planned and put on paper was fantastic until we clogged in and did a sample session when, that's kind of crap. And so, but then you start adjusting because it is those little things like mic placement, right? If you're doing a hybrid space, guess what? The ceiling mic or room mic doesn't need to be in the center of the room. Move it, take it down, right? No one cares. Put it right up by the faculty member. Same thing with lighting. Those types of things, you're not worried about the students, coming in and, I won't say safety hazards, but you know what I mean? Like you don't have to worry about what the rest of the room looks like, only that area that's being captured, right? So I think that's really the best thing and where we had the biggest kind of learning curve in trying to make it all the perfect room, and it didn't end up being the perfect, shared content or perfect experience on the far end. And that's where we went back and adjusted a lot of those things.
And I'll tell you, that's 3 very interesting, cool sets of practical best practices right there. I think that's outstanding. Now, guys, we did have one come into the chat here. Let me just read it off to you here. So the question from Danielle is, how are districts able to find funding to send technology? And then the message got a little short. So I think the general question, though, is, hey, and I think, Butch, you mentioned this early on, hey, this all sounds great. But last I checked, all these greedy manufacturers need to get paid for this stuff. So where's this money coming from? So do you have any kind of thoughts or best practices or sources that you'd want to take? And maybe, Joe, would you start this one off, sir?
Yeah. Obviously, we're going to be a little bit different being a private higher education institution as opposed to a district. So for us, it's really just the cost of doing business. I mean, I know that there is the funding, the PPP is out there, and there are ways to get funding. But honestly, with the nature of it, I mean, if we're if you're not open, I mean, if you sit there and think as far as higher ed, we rely not just on students and tuition, but events and the cost, the housing and the parking. I mean, there's a lot that you lose in not being open, quote unquote. So sending someone a laptop, a Chromebook, a hotspot, it does literally become the cost of doing business. And at $60,000 a year tuition, it's the least we can do. Right. But we have, for us too, we partnered up with a third party vendor for laptop loaners, for example, because we couldn't go out and just, my department runs a laptop loaner program, but we usually only have a couple of hundred, well, we blew through those the first couple weeks that we realized people had to go online. Right. So we have a third party vendor to help send that out. And, it's just something we have to pick up, their student fee, their activity fee, quote unquote, isn't being used now, right? Because they're not around. So you can move some of that money around to now support their new activity, which is, learning from home.
Totally got it. Butch, would you mind following that? I know it's higher ed, yes, but a different flavor of higher ed. So how would you take the funding question?
We're public. Well, we've had to just reprioritize a lot of things. We've changed our projects to do this. We did have, luckily we were in the middle of a refresh where we're changing out some technologies in classrooms, so we're able to get some funding there. We've got some funding from CARES Act, a few million from that. That's helped out a lot, and making sure, especially around students, getting them the technology they need. So that's where a lot of that funding came from for us to get started. We're still wondering how we're going to maintain it going forward, but we're getting what they need now and figuring it out.
Understand. Well, Kyle, from the K-12 perspective, sir, how would you answer that one?
Yeah, funding is always the big question, especially in K-12. For us in Grapevine-Colleyville, our process towards a one-to-one started 10 years ago. So we were already of a mindset moving very strongly to a device for every child. So when COVID hit us in March, we were already at the point to where all of our kids were issued devices through local bond elections and things like that we've built up over the years. But I look at my peers around me, and a lot of them, it was scavenging all the classrooms and all of a sudden finding these laptops and stuff that they've had in there that they didn't realize, and really pulling together everything they could to get any kind of resource to the students. We did have to get creative at first because, as everybody knows, the market was getting flooded with people buying Chromebooks, getting hotspots, getting everything like that. So we worked a lot with our local cities to open up all sorts of Wi-Fi and press Wi-Fi out as far as we can on all of our facilities, city facilities, and try to almost build a free Wi-Fi network out through the community so there was some sort of connectivity in there. We took our school buses, parking them in places, broadcasting Wi-Fi, so using those tools as well. But the funding aspect from the CARES Act, like Butch, that's helped a lot. Of course, every state's treating it a little differently on how much you're going to get or how they're doing that. But we're also finding, too, that some of our parents are stepping up and, my kid has a device, so you don't need to provide one for mine. Here, use that for somebody else. But, too, like Butch said, priorities have changed. And for us, the whole last semester of school, we did save a lot of money on utilities. We weren't there. So let's shift that funding over a little bit to help us fill that gap in other areas. And then that long term, like Butch mentioned as well, is going to be the shock and awe for a lot of folks right now that are mass buying technology. What happens year 4, year 5 if you make it that far with all that stuff you just bought? So there is going to be a cliff out there as far as technology folks and planning that you need to always be aware of that's going to catch you at some point.
Totally got it. No, excellent comments. And it's really interesting that you come from 3 different perspectives on that one from funding. That's interesting. Well, so particular design ideas, right? So I think there's some folks on the call that are saying, hey, this is cool, this is great, but I wonder in each of their environments, is there a particular maybe broad use case that there's a specific design that they've put together and had success with? So Kyle, would you mind starting that one, sir, and any kind of particular kind of outline of a design that you'd want to give the audience?
Absolutely. So we have a couple of different designs that we worked towards. And two, it came down to our funding aspect. We didn't want to go and dump a lot of money into something, and then all of a sudden, thankfully the virus disappears, and now we've got all this stuff. So we went in a very streamlined approach. Since we have our panels in all of our classrooms, we adapted just web cameras that we mounted from the ceiling. I have a $100 webcam. It's a great quality webcam that we mount to the ceiling, controlled by the panel, giving our instructors full control. And that was our base model that we put out in 500 classrooms. Then we came back with sound, because like Joe said, it's not any good if you can't hear me. So putting mics on the teachers to interface in was our next aspect. So that's our standard classroom, is a mic on the teacher, a webcam attached to their interactive panel. We then needed to really look at some of our CTE courses, auto mechanics, all these hands-on, to where you're not standing in front of the board. So getting cameras that are more portable in the classroom that we can move around, put over the engine, have them working, or the health science. So it's a lot more flexibility in camera design, which could be as simple as an iPad on a rolling stand that we attach into our WebEx meetings to use just as a camera. That has offered us a lot of the flexibility too. And then the portable systems of an interactive panel on a display with reinforced sound that we can roll and make any area. So that's kind of our three directives. We have one design for complete virtual, and it's pretty much a teacher in front of a panel, but there's also another panel in front of them so that they can see the big Brady Bunch of their students online in a bigger fashion, so they can interact with them. Because, if I'm teaching a class and I'm having to look at that small laptop screen of all my little kids, the interactivity can be a struggle. So that was another aspect that we were thinking, is how to blow out either with a projector or something, just the display for the teacher to see the kids themselves while they're delivering instruction. So that's kind of our mix that we have right now throughout all of our classrooms.
Outstanding. Butch, what would you say, sir? Any kind of designs you'd want to give the audience of use cases and design approaches?
We're a lot like Kyle. We took what we had and built from that. We try not to start all over. We wanted people not to have to learn a whole new system. Plus, we had to consider cost. So we went into our existing classrooms. We are adding like tracking cameras that'll track the instructor as they teach, microphones, and wireless sharing in the classroom. So they can walk around with their iPad or whatever they would like, and not be tethered to just the instructor area. So, and then like we talked about before, in these ad hoc areas, we are having portable carts with displays on them. And the only other areas so we're going to have some rooms that have where the instructor is with a few students. And I mentioned a while ago about the overflow. And so those will be a little bit different, where the camera may be facing toward the students. The instructor can see that on the display in their classroom, and students can still ask questions and things like that. So those are the three types that we're really looking at.
Totally got it. Joe, what would you say, sir?
So it's funny because everyone's going to hate me for this, because I actually did get to blow everything up and spend millions and start over, advantage of being a private R1 institution. It's funny because, and I tell the story that I'm, dumb luck solved the problem, because we actually had already been going through our digital transformation, quote unquote, prior to COVID. So I was actually in the process of moving all of our services as much as possible up to the cloud and software-based solutions, AV over IP, those things that would already be UC-centric. And we were already planning on doing that this summer and doing a complete enterprise-wide upgrade to basically, hybrid space every one of our classrooms. Now, I was never planning for a COVID, in a pandemic. I thought, well, what if we had a major earthquake and only half of our buildings were usable? Maybe we could stream things across, things like that. Or you had an expert in the field and you want them to be able to call into the room, those types of things, right? But then COVID happens and everyone says, okay, what do we do with our classrooms? And I thought, well, we already solved it. Right. So all of a sudden I look like a genius, complete dumb luck. Absolutely. Everyone who knows me knows I'm far from a genius. But the thing is what the key to success was going back to that flexibility, right? Why were we actually able to answer the problem? Was because we didn't have to use the problem in a reactionary sense, right? I was able to say, what's the best way that students can learn? And that's to make every space that we have a place that you could learn from or teach from, to make the world a possibility, right? And that was, but looking at it from that global mindset meant that the choices that we could make as we did all of our, hundreds of classrooms, really easy, right? And I wanted that kind of, operability from anywhere, the connection from anywhere. So now when you sit there and go, okay, well, what kind of design? You have to make it simple. You have to start from what's your how are you getting content from point A to point B, and move around that to where, the suggestions already made. A simple, USB camera can do that. We were already using a high-end USB camera because, different to Butch. I personally can't stand PTZ cameras and movable cameras. Like I don't know, something I don't like. Because I think, for me, the faculty members, I was thinking, for faculty, they set the camera up in one place and then they go walk to the other side of the room and teach the whole thing. So it's a great, picture of an empty lectern, for the whole thing. So I love the tracking part. So we were already thinking is how can we, simplify our spaces? And it's amazing that those things that you do, the USB cameras, even a USB mic, or we were already putting in ceiling mics, because we didn't want to have faculty worry about, having to touch a mic and grab a mic. Now you sit there and wonder, well, how are you going to keep this stuff clean? If you look at it from a pandemic, you don't have to worry about that. If you already have a ceiling mic, price points on ceiling mics are pretty far up there. So that is one difficult thing if you're looking at an enterprise-wide model. But I think as you sit there and go, okay, how can I do this? Like, we're able to hold a whole webinar here over a UC solution, right? And all we need is an internet connection and a webcam. And so I think if you take that and just, put it on steroids for your classroom, that can do it. So keep it down to that lowest common denominator, and that's the content transfer from A to B. And then just what do you need on each end? Again, with those still other best practices we talked about, clarity of audio, et cetera.
Love it. No, great stuff. Well, I know you guys in your kind of administrative roles, you get a lot of folks talking to you with concerns, right? I mean, you got students, you got parents, you got administrators, you got faculty, you got everybody, kind of getting in your ear, right? So can you maybe get a couple of the most significant concerns you guys are hearing? And Butch, why don't you start with this one if you could, sir? Just what's in your ear the most? Butch, we got you muted, sir.
Sorry, success to technology. I mean, people just don't have it. How are we going to do this online stuff if we don't have a laptop or we don't have internet access? So that is probably the number one that we hear. The other thing is learning these new systems is a struggle. Instructors have been doing it this way for the last 30 years, and now you're asking them to learn a whole new system. To tell you the truth, they're really jumping on the wagon, though. I mean, before this, we were kind of really struggling about adoption. We had these collaborative tools. People were using things like Microsoft Teams and WebEx and interactive boards like the Newline boards, and you always have those few instructors jump right on it. They love it, and it kind of spreads that way a little bit. But overall, organizationally, we were struggling with adoption on using conferencing tools and collaboration tools. But COVID kind of fixed that for us. They had no choice. They all jumped on it, and everything seems to be going really well. I think after this is all over, when we look back, I think we're going to be a better organization for it, because we've learned to use these tools, learned to work a little bit differently, and provide content like everybody else has said on the panel, is that everybody learns differently, everybody needs different tools, and so now we'll be able to provide those tools.
No, that's an interesting, Butch. I've heard a number of people kind of pontificate about this, and I've heard that this has moved the whole collaborative use at the end user level forward 10 to 12 years. Like in 4 months, everybody was grabbed by the shirt and drugged forward 10 or 12 years to say, oh, I guess I'm going to learn how to use this by tomorrow because I have to do it, right? So I totally hear what you're saying there. Joe, what would you comment about that as far as what you're hearing in your ear the loudest?
I guess it depends on who it comes from. But if you want to say in higher ed in general, and you see this all across, everywhere, it's why should a student pay for an online experience? Why is it worth $60,000 if they're just going to sit at home, right? And while that sounds like a valid, concern you have to sit there and think, okay, well, how can we now create that same value, right? Because of course, if you look at my screen, my background, it's a great, beautiful campus. People want to walk around. There's something about, being there and being in person. But if you look at where the value is you're being taught by a Nobel Prize winner, regardless if you're in class or it's virtual, right? But so now we have to ensure that quality is kept from end to end, right? As I mentioned in the last answer. So it's that justification for the modality has been really tough. And again, people understand, as we've already said several times, no one wanted this. I understand this is the way it is, but can you justify it? Can you justify why would you not do a gap year or do a year at a community college, and transfer those units in? How can you still bring the value and sell that? So that's been tough. And, so when you start creating online, other ideas become, virtual quads and online community and social groups that can be done via, web conferencing, those types of campus experiences, we've already started to see it with the return of baseball. Yay. Where you create, a virtual, one of the things as teams is you can send a boo and send a cheer to the thing, things like that, where you start finding ways to connect and create a new type of community and redefine what it means to attend school, in a virtual environment. Right. And I think it's really neat, the creativity we've had and the, virtual concerts and art fairs and, and there, you've seen a lot of other ways that shows. Maybe people would never go to a student art festival, on campus. But if you hold it virtually and you share those videos, they're getting an audience and sharing their work in ways that they couldn't before. And now we can reshare that. And so you start recognizing that you can answer social issues and social injustice issues through this. And a lot of ways that you can, leverage the technology when you start looking at it from a community building point of view, which I think you never did in a virtual environment, right? Prior to COVID, online was online. It was post up the lesson. The faculty member is going to teach to a webcam for an hour. You're going to download the pamphlet or the, whatever the PDF of the week is. And then you're going to write your little post, your little post, and 2 people are going to comment on it. And that's an online course, right? Well, now that's changed. And there's part of me who goes, even when we end up on campus, I hope we keep some of this. I really hope we keep that virtual community and work on our virtual quad.
That's a really cool idea. It is a similar theme that Butch was saying. We're going through this kind of pain and difficult time, but on the backside, probably is going to help us all be better in a variety of ways. That's very interesting. Kyle, what do you think, sir? What's those voices in your ear that you're hearing the loudest?
So it started from the instructor, the teacher aspect of it is, we don't have the time to create 2 different types of lessons for my virtual kids, for my in-person kids. And my lesson prep is going to go, all these different ways. And then you have those one teachers that we consider singletons that, they are the only teacher that teaches maybe German. So they're going to have to teach in both environments and those things. So really the strong concern from the instructors was, how can we keep it similar so we don't have to do double prep in our delivery method and so forth that our students are comfortable with, and streamline the applications we're using, because we could buy a lot of new tools and toys and all sorts of stuff, but it's going to be too much. They can't grasp all that. Then when we transition to concerns coming from our our parents' side, and it's some with the students too, is we're creating the educational foundation for these students that they're going to build upon to go to college. And if we can't deliver the quality of instruction at these critical ages, we're going to really start seeing the ramifications of this for years down the road with our students. So the quality of instruction, and then add on that, kind of like what Joe was saying, the social emotional connection that these kids at this young age really need. So we focus on with our teachers to have interactive, almost like the virtual quad that we're mentioning. It's just getting your class together. Maybe we're playing a game. Maybe we're doing something. It's not we're teaching something. It's just talking and having those kind of conversations. And then the other concern on the far spectrum, of course, from administration or school board and leadership, is the accountability and rigor so that we can keep moving that needle of instruction for our students. And how can we ensure that's happening at a quality across the board, from Miss Jones sending it from her house to Mr. Jones in the lab? How can we provide that consistency for our community? Because just like at the colleges, they have choices. Private school, they can go homeschool. You can go also, if we need to have keep our consistent high level of instruction, and how can we ensure that we're doing that? So that's kind of all the different elements that we're hearing from our folks. The last one from the students and the LMS solve that is, we don't want to go to 12 different applications to have to learn in your class. I need one point that I can go to that can feed all my resources. I can't keep up with how you communicate on Twitter or Remind or all these different tools I'm having. I need one-stop shop to be able to communicate with you. So that's been a big thing for our students as well.
That's a lot of voices, gentlemen. It's a lot of juggling. I know all three of you guys are having to do. I know we're getting a little close on time. I want to try and squeeze in one more question before we open it up for the floor. Is if there is one thing, you've got your designs in place, the world keeps spinning and the days on the calendar keep clicking away, right? So the students are coming back, however they're coming back, in whatever form they're coming. So at some point the game begins, and then you get to figure out, hey, this one worked great, or that didn't work so great, and we need to tweak a little bit. Is there one thing that you'll be looking at, kind of monitoring in some way as you go through the semester to say, okay, looking like we're green over here. Wait, this one's heading a little bit yellow, and oh boy, we got a red one over here. We really got to jump on. So Kyle, would you mind starting that one, sir?
So at the most basic level, it's our monitoring of daily connectivity for the students to make sure they're connecting with us each day, and then how long they're engaged or connecting with us. So a lot of matrix going into our different things to see, are they participating in the live lessons, watching the recorded lessons, just those basic connectivity matrix, because we need to make sure that the kids are, one, even being connected. And so if we're having a problem, we're following up immediately to see why haven't you been able to join and those kind of things. And then it's going to be measuring a lot of the academic growth to make sure that we're at least maintaining where we're at and trying to see where that growth comes in. So a lot of analytics and data. It's kind of like that aha moment that everybody mentioned with technology in general. Haven't had that great of adoption in K-12, but the analytics and data now are going to be very powerful for us to see how our kids are reacting, connecting, and what type of communication is going back and forth. So that's what we're really going to be watching a lot of, and making sure that every student is connected with each day.
Love it. Butch, what about you, sir?
Yeah, it's kind of the same as Kyle. We're going to monitor success. Are our instructors being successful? Are our students being successful? And if not, why? Is it something else that we can change? Do we need to change a modality? Do we need to change, when things are being offered, things like that? So really, it's just watching that success. We do get a lot of analytics as well as, on usage. Are people using it? Are they not using it? Can we stop using this system and move those resources to another that may be more successful? So really success and watching that analytics and data, and what's being used and what's not.
Got it. Joe, what about you, sir?
Yeah. Echoing what both of them said, but on top of that, one thing that I'm preaching to my team all the time is that we need to be fast, fluid, and flexible throughout all of this, right? since we don't know, bringing it full circle to the initial, questions, we don't know what even tomorrow holds, right? So when we recognize that March 13th, Friday the 13th, when we went fully online, we really just had to survive for 6 weeks at the beginning of May. Yeah, and everyone understood that you were in survival mode. Well, now there's no excuse for not putting something successful. We've had all summer to plan. Even if we don't know what it's going to look like, there's now an expectation of quality and there's expectation of success. Acceptance is now already there. So you want to start figuring out how can you, find the right, is it being effective? Is the choices you've made, are they effective for the situation as the situation exists that day, right? And that might not be the case the next week or the next month, as already said. Well, you have to switch tools, switch ways to do it, understanding faculty are changing their pedagogy. There are a lot of moving factors, and then that's also in scale. So we've done a very, very intensive hypercare program. So we're doing trainings via, webinars and in person and video clips and PDF downloads, understanding that one of those 4 or 5 options will work for somebody. We're bringing in all hands on deck, contractors in for the first few weeks of class to make sure that we have boots on the ground to help faculty in this new environment. Added instructional designers to help with the far end and what that, is going to look like from an LMS side. And so you start bringing in all these tools so that you can do a lot of hand holding, early on. Hopefully you don't need it, but we know even how the semester begins could change on a whim based on how the curve goes and how, as I already said, governor's announcements could come after semester already started, right? There are things that you have to start to take into account. So judging effectiveness through a very high touch, a socially distanced high touch, hypercare program is kind of our solution, and how we're going to continue to monitor, what is happening, being fast, fluid, and flexible.
I love the 3 Fs. I may have to steal that from you. That's a really good one. All right. No, great feedback there, guys. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, so I will take a sec. There's not anything in the chat right now. I will open up the floor. Anybody, if you've been holding a question, feel free to come off mute and pose it to any of the gentlemen or all of them. So I'll give a sec for anybody to come off if they have anything burning. And if not, it's a Newline webinar, so we got to give away some free stuff. So we're going to turn it over to our marketing guys in a sec to make some people happy here at the end. But I'm going to give a sec for anybody to come off mute that wants to with a question. It's a pretty big group. Sometimes the questions from the field don't come in when it's a big group. So all right, good stuff. Well then, hold on just a sec. Don't believe we can come off mute. Oh my gosh! Well, that's a way to keep the questions down. We got you hamstrung here. So if anybody'd like to type anything in the chat, then feel free to do that. And we'll do 2 things at once here, just because we're about 2 minutes from our hour wrap up, and we do want to be sensitive to everyone's time. Brittany, why don't you give some good news to some participants out there on what they're gonna take home with them.
Yeah, I surely can. So we do have 2 people who were fast action registrants who will be getting Starbucks gift cards today who attended the webinar. So thank you to Ed Rebert and Shannon Provence who registered in the top 5 who came to the webinar. I will be contacting you all with gift cards. And then also our grand prize or virtual door prize of a Amazon Echo Show will be going to BMAC. I don't have the full name, but I do have the contact information, so I will be contacting them. So congratulations to all of our prize winners.
Outstanding. Thank you, Brittany. Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, I thanked you at the beginning, and we have to thank you at the end. I knew this would be fast-paced. It seemed like it was about 7 minutes long, but we have gone an hour here. Really can't thank the 3 of you enough. I think just the response of how many folks popped into this and stayed the whole time. I think this was really great content. So Butch and Kyle, Joe, thank you very much for giving us an hour of your very busy days. and just really appreciate it. Thanks so much for the time. And with that, we will wrap up our webinar, and I hope everybody stays safe and has a great rest of the day. Thanks to all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.